Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Gemini Relationships Part 2. And yes, this does apply and pertain to the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Anyway, people, the first thing I'm going to talk about is, many of you may remember the first series I had on the zodiac signs and relationships. It was more about how the zodiac signs were in specific relationships based on probable house cusps in the charts for the zodiac signs. But now this is more generic, and in this specific video, this is about how Gemini may be in terms of relationships just in general and how they act in them. So anyway, first thing about Gemini relationships is, and I see the thing that stands out is that Gemini often likes to keep things rather light and superficial in relationships. I had one experience with a Gemini Sun, and she had a Gemini Sun and Ascendant, and pretty much epitomized how they can be in relationships. This was actually on a Facebook friend. And what happened was, apparently she must have inadvertently hit the close friend button on my profile. In other words, upgrading from a regular friend to close friend. Apparently it was by accident, because when I wrote her to thank her about it, she said she didn't mean to do that or what have you, and then all of a sudden she had deleted me as a friend after that. So unfortunately, and I'm not saying this to be overly negative or derisive toward Gemini, but Gemini they often do like to keep things very light in their relationships. Unless they really find that elusive love, then things could be a little bit different. The thing about, and I think that experience really can epitomize how Gemini can be in relationships. Now, the thing about it is, Gemini they could be very mercurial. They could be very difficult in terms of gauging where you stand with him or her. Now, it's kind of interesting. This can make them somewhat compelling, but it could be very exasperating, and it could really agitate someone at the same time. Geminis are very interesting in the fact you don't always know, where you are with that person in that connection. It kind of keeps you on keeps you hanging on a string in a way with them. The thing about it is, Gemini, they could be very sporadic in their relationships. They might hang out with you for a number of consecutive days in a row, and then all of a sudden you may not see him or her for an indefinite period. Now, this is generally not malicious, I don't think, on Gemini's part. But Geminis will often detach themselves to some degree from somebody because they could be very averse to becoming too close to a person. They could simply have an anathema to commitment and closeness. Frankly, actually, it could put them in a state of trepidation, I believe, and petrify them. Now, and it doesn't matter whether it could be a platonic relationship or a romantic one, a friendship or what have you. Now, for Gemini, the thing about them is the best way to retain, or best ways, I should say, to retain a friendship or a significant other connection with Gemini is one way is to be a very good communicator, be articulate, be very well-rounded, diversified, and versatile, being able to do many different things. And also stagnation could be a very dirty word for the zodiac sign Gemini. Monotony could be a very dirty word for Gemini. They are ones that really like to have their variety. They often can't sit still for a prolonged period. Someone had told me that Danny Bonaducci, who has Gemini rising, that he has difficulty sitting still, and it doesn't really surprise me, having a Gemini ascendant, that he has that he could be like that. I could see him as being very restless and antsy. Now, the thing about it is, going back to the thing about Gemini not really having an anathema to being close to others. The thing about it is, if you accuse Gemini of being overly cold or callous, they might actually look at you incredulously, and they might not understand where you're coming from, so to speak. They may not understand why you would think that, because they may not see themselves like that. But I think what it is a lot of people will perceive Gemini that way because of their detachment. Doesn't mean that Gemini is devoid of any sympathy or compassion, but those qualities are just not always strongly expressed outwardly with this sign. Now, the thing about it too is, in going back to the terrible Gemini has, it could be so averse to that commitment because I think part of the reason is it can simply deprive them of having their variety in life, whether it would be in their relationship situations or just general activities in life. Because when you settle down with somebody, most of you know, but when you settle down with a person, stagnation sometimes can set in. It means a lot of times you have to be committed to go to be at a certain place at a certain time and be there for a certain duration. And I think Gemini just likes to have their variety and activity to do what they want to do when they want to do it, and not have to stay somewhere for a really prolonged period. Because it could just get monotonous with them. Aquarius is very similar to Gemini, but Aquarius, it's more of just a general freedom independence syndrome and not wanting to be that nonconformist and not conforming to a regular routine or what have you. Gemini, I think they just like to have their variety is really the main reason, and being able to have their activity and not to have things overly monotonous. So anyway, well, the thing too is, as far as Gemini goes, another thing with Gemini and relationships is that, well, one good thing I will say is that you can count on Gemini. I mean, in a situation, whether you're a friend or significant other, you're connected with Gemini, they could act very quickly with lightning speed in an emergency situation. I mean, this is a sign that has very quick reactions. And the thing about it is, I had a Gemini rising friend one time many years ago. I may have stated this in another video, I believe, but if you didn't see it, I'll talk about it here. The thing was, I was sitting down, my friend and I were sitting down, Gemini rising friend and I were sitting under an awning one time at by my grandma's driveway, and her vehicle, was on the driveway was kind of unorthodox. It was on a decline, and the car started rolling back almost inexplicably, and I did not notice what was happening, and I just I glanced away momentarily, I guess, and before I knew it, seconds went by, and I saw him running very fast, and he had practically caught up with the vehicle, and he was ready to open the door. And I think what he did was, I believe he may have opened the car door and tried to go in and put his foot on the brake, but it actually slowed down on its own, I believe. But the point being is that, well, Geminis, we're basically on one point where we are, us mere mortals, obviously with comparatively as far as the speed goes, cannot always keep up with Gemini. Gemini will be on step B when you're still pondering step A, so to speak. And I have a Gemini moon, but at the same time, he had Gemini rising. I think the energy, obviously Gemini rising on average is going to be pronounced more than someone with a Gemini moon. So that really showed right there. And this is just like, they can move very fast. If you blink once or twice, they could be, it seems like they could be 30 or 40 feet away from you. They can move 30 or 40 feet in that time, it seems like, these Gemini people. So, might not be much of an exaggeration or distortion, but you understand what I'm saying. The thing about it is, too, and as far as Gemini goes as well in relationships, now we know that Gemini is the not the most demonstrative or emotional of the zodiac signs. The emotions can often be light and superficial. And as I stated before, me having a Gemini moon, my emotions are not exactly protracted, prolonged, or sustained. I guess you could say with the Gemini moon, I have a lot of emotional diversity. And I think it certainly balances out my Cancer sun sign. So anyway, but the thing about Gemini is that if you're connected with a Gemini, whether it's on a platonic level or something stronger, and you want to play some kind of games with them, they often like mental challenging games, or something with the mind. It could be like Tetris, Sudoku, chess, for example, and even something that I call it in an inquisitive game. There's a game called Loaded Questions, I believe. I mean, Geminis love words. They often bedazzle others with their, verbosity and their strong vocabulary. Scrabble could be something that they could strongly enjoy. I'll tell you one game that Gemini may really despise is that there's a game called Watch Your Mouth. And basically, when people be trying to talk in the game wearing some kind of it's like some kind of a talking with some kind of retractor or something that really prevents you from talking very lucidly or clearly. It's like some kind of mouth guard or something that that really the person will be wearing, and people will try to interpret and construe what the person's actually saying, and it comes out a little bit garbled. Well, the point I'm making is if Gemini has to wear something like that, that would be one of the last things I could see them wanting to do, because they want to be, heard whatever they say very clearly, in a very clear and lucid manner. They don't really want people having to guess what they're actually trying to say. But that's the sign of the quintessential communicator. But anyway, I'm really joking about that, of course. But the thing about it, what's interesting about Gemini 2 and captivating in their relationships, that they are they on a subconscious level, even though they're not ones that you really think of the kind is like really enamored with love or really trying to find is somebody on a romantic level, not as strong as a lot of other signs, but perhaps on a subconscious level. I'll elaborate on more of that in a little bit. I've talked about before in previous videos that I do believe actors and actresses can sometimes subconsciously at least be connected, or if not on a conscious level, sometimes a subconscious level, be connected to roles that correspond with their astrological charts in nature. And this is no exception. Many of you may have remembered the series Mike Hammer, which starred actor Stacy Keach. Now, in real life, he has a Gemini sun. And people that have seen that series with him may have seen on a number of occasions he would be running after some woman, and he would be trying to catch up with her, and she'd turn a corner or whatever, and she would be gone. I think that almost kind of what that is that's almost symbolic of Gemini looking for that elusive love on that perpetual quest for it. Gemini often has Taurus on the 12th house cusp in a natal or solar chart. So I think that moment when they were showing that was almost like kind of really very symbolic, I think, of Gemini trying to find their elusive love in that constant, endless search for him or her sometimes. So anyway, going back to Gemini relationships, well, the thing about it is that Gemini, remember, is a sign that can be very restless and antsy. They can have a very difficult time in sitting still. They may not have really the patience all the time. They're so restless that to even stay at a movie that might surpass 2 hours. And the thing about it is, and another thing, and so I mean, the things that they would like, movies, I would suggest probably under 2 hours if you're involved with a Gemini. Now, the thing is, Gemini can have actually strong powers of concentration, but because their minds are so restless, they'll often dart very quickly to something else, because their attention span and tenacity could be like a gnat's, basically. So, and anyway, another thing about Gemini 2 in relationships people have to remember is that though generally they're not malicious, Gemini sometimes will prevaricate, but it's often done to not hurt the other person's feelings. Like I stated, it's generally not malicious. They're not being mean, but maybe they feel a lot of times it's easier to tell a lie than it is to tell the truth. And let me go back again to how some actors and actresses can often, I think, be consciously, if not subconsciously, be attracted to roles that correspond with their astrological nature. Now, actor Jim Carrey is no exception. I believe the title of the movie was The Majestic. It was some movie where he was pretending to be somebody in order to give hope to a community or a city or what have you, and he kept the town, at least most of them, fooled for a good part of at least a good part of the movie. And the thing about it was, now it was like, he has a Gemini moon in real life, Jim Carrey, and a lot of times I think Geminis will just do things. It's not to be deceptive or duplicitous, but it's to sometimes to because it might feel like they're pacifying people by what they're doing or saying. And I think that really was kind of like on an unconscious level, perhaps maybe Carrie's Gemini moon coming out, and then he also has a Scorpio ascendant in real life, so you have that compassionate energy there as well, wanting to give a city or town hope and give them some ebullience and happiness. So I mean, that's what I think might have been actually coming out astrologically in that role with him. Now, also too, it's funny that Geminis in relationships, they really don't like to be pinned down. And the thing about it is, this could be really a metaphor, but it can also be actual literal. And it's funny how it's kind of connected with Gemini, that it could apply and pertain to them literally and figuratively. There was a time when it was in the middle school, that I had a Gemini rising friend that he had two people that were on top of him, and I guess they were just kind of wrestling with him or whatever, and he was almost pinned down. He had his face, facing the ground, and his back was up, and his stomach was close to the ground, but you could see his back. So he's kind of in a push-up, I guess you could say, kind of position. But what he did was he did kind of a quick push-up maneuver, real like a jolt upward, and it knocked the two people off of him. So I think what it does is it symbolizes Gemini, the way they are in terms, I mean, it might be hard to pin them down literally, but also from a figurative standpoint as well in relationships. So when Gemini actually starts seeing you more, Gemini Sun, Moon, or Ascendant starts seeing you more frequently and consistently, that's a very good sign right there that the relationship is escalating and evolving, and that he or she is starting to become closer to you. And the last thing I want to get at as far as Gemini goes is that if you make a Gemini an adversary or an enemy, you can be in trouble. You know how Scorpio can be with being very vengeful and vindictive, probably the most of any zodiac sign. But Gemini may not be far behind, and they kind of can get you with a lot of that mental, the cunning, and being very shrewd and street savvy, and doing things that you would just not, most people may not even think of doing to get back at you. Going back to Gemini rising again, I had another Gemini rising friend some time ago, many years ago. This might have been close to 30 years ago, and I had got into some kind of altercation or argument with him or what have you. And later on, I was going to pick my bicycle up from his place, right? And I was just going to take my bicycle and I was going to go home. But lo and behold, when I got to his place, I saw the bicycle outside of his home, and I noticed that one of the tires were all bent out. It was mangled and all bent out of shape, and I couldn't figure it out how he actually did that. I didn't know if he ran it over or what have you. And from what I found out later, how he did that was he had one person he positioned like half the bicycle on part of a sidewalk, and he had one person stand on one end of the bicycle, and he apparently stomped on the other end and caused it to get in that mangled type position, and get the tire all bent out of shape. And to me, that was something. I mean, Gemini will do things to you. They want to get you back. They're going to do it in a way that maybe you might not have ever experienced before. I'll tell you, because Gemini will outmaneuver the best of them, they'll outsmart the best of them. And Gemini is certainly not one, even though it's a mutable sign, it's a sign that you really don't want to make an enemy, because they will find that way to really get you back, and you won't, and no matter what you do to get back at Gemini, it probably won't outdo whatever it was that they were able to do to you. So, because they are very shrewd and quick-witted and very cunning. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Gemini Relationships Part 2. Stay tuned next time, where I'll be talking about the zodiac sign Cancer Relationships Part 2. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.